Welcome to SalonEra, a salon experience for the 21st century that brings together artists and audiences for music and conversation. Produced remotely, SalonEra is not subject to geographic limitations or conventional programming limitations. We're creating new opportunities for artists to collaborate, and we're bringing our work and our passions into your home. Our conversations are spontaneous, and we want you to be a part of the experience. Please feel free to engage in the chat at any time. We'd love to see and feel your encouragement or applause, and we look forward to hearing from you directly when we go live for the Q&A following the broadcast. We'd also like you to have the best experience possible when watching SalonEra, so we recommend that you check your settings and ensure that they are set to the highest quality on both YouTube or Facebook. You can learn more about how to view SalonEra in the highest quality by visiting our website. Finally, while SalonEra is free to watch, I urge you to consider making a donation. Your support compensates our participating artists whose livelihoods have been so deeply affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Thanks for watching and enjoy the show. The music of J.S. Bach is at once joyful and serious, accessible and intellectual. Perhaps most importantly, the music of Bach feeds the soul in troubled times. I'm very pleased to introduce our guests for this evening's debut episode of SalonEra. We have soprano Sherezade Panthaki joining us from New Haven, Connecticut, violinist Shelby Yamin, who is also SalonEra's associate producer, joining us from Palisades, New York, and SalonEra Artists in Residence Eric Milnes, who also produced the videos on this episode, and Viola gamba player Mélisande Corriveau, who are both in Granby, Quebec. Good evening, everyone. It's so great to welcome you here for SalonEra's debut episode. And I know, well, as Baroque musicians, we spend a lot of time and commit a lot of our energy to performing music by Bach, as well as many other composers. As an oboist, Bach keeps me really, I always think of it as my bread and butter. But I think Bach means a lot to each of us individually, and I wondered if we could start out this evening by sharing some kind of meaningful memory, or perhaps an aha moment or experience that you had with the music of Bach at some point. Why don't we start with Shelby?
Yeah, so like you said, Bach is just this huge force, especially for us violinists. His sonatas and partitas are just like repertoire that follows you from the very beginning. But for me, coming from being a modern violinist and knowing those sonatas and like really feeling kind of like they follow you along through auditions and everything, to come to Bach as an early musician and try to look at his music with fresh eyes really influenced my my commitment to doing early music, because it was just this total perspective shift. And so I really owe a lot to the fact that I did know those pieces so well, and that through his music it really allowed me to change my perspective.
Fantastic. And Sherry, how about for you?
Oh, thanks, Deborah. I'm so glad to be here with everyone.
Thank you.
I have so many Bach memories and points of intersection and reference and delight. It's hard to decide which one to choose, but Bach, listening to the B minor Mass, specifically the Gloria from the B minor Mass, is the first memory of music that I have from my childhood. I think I was about 2 or 3 years old, and I was so fortunate to grow up in a house where my parents played quite a lot of classical music all the time, and I remember that movement is one that I asked them to just play over and over and over again. I couldn't get over the sound of the trumpets and the orchestra and the choir and everything together, and I'm sure I sort of danced around to it as a kid, because so much of Bach is dance. And then when I started piano lessons, I started playing more Bach, but I do still remember that as being the very first sort of sound of orchestral and choral music that I can commit to memory.
Yeah, I have to say that I'm so glad that you mentioned the Gloria. You know, I have played that piece probably close to 100 times, and the experience is a visceral one. As an oboe player, of course, the Gloria is the first time that we hear the trumpets at all in the piece, and yeah, it sounds so silly, but it's also the point at which I switch instruments after playing, nonstop Oboe d'amore with my lips kind of falling off, and I wonder if I'm even going to ever make it through the rest of the piece. And yet this incredible virtuosic brilliance happens, and I love that, I think we all respond to that in our own way, and my response is very physical and visceral. That's fabulous. Eric, how about you?
I think after decades of directing and recording Bach, that when I was in Regensburg at the festival and conducting cantatas there, it wasn't till I received the video later that I could know that that audience of 800 was all mouthing the texts.
Wow.
At least it seemed that way to me. But on the video, yes, I mean, it was Chris Log. People know this well.
Yeah.
And to see the camera pan over the audience and to see the people mouthing the words along while we made the music was transformative for me. As I say, after decades of working with the music of Bach, to remember that it's a living art form and we're not just museum curators, and that it comes from a cultural source, and that source is still vibrant and alive. And I believe that someday our audiences in North America will be mouthing the words to Bach's sacred music.
Yeah, no, it's, I think one of the reasons that we wanted to begin our series with the music of Bach is because it's something that so many of us can share and really and enjoy on a whole wide variety of levels. Mélisande, what about for you?
Well, for me, I have to say the most touching moments of Bach music were related to the singing part of the music, being either passions or cantatas. I think it's where I'm the most compelled. But of course, I play the cello as well, and those suites are fantastic. And I play the viol, and his three sonatas are also very beautiful. Mm-hmm. And recently, I've taken the habit of trying to do like Bach does himself, which is, as we also will hear today during the SalonEra, to go and grab some music from other people, because I do play also the Par-dessus de viol, and I am preparing a CD of transcriptions, so I've been playing a lot of Bach lately.
Well,
and appropriating some beautiful material. Yeah.
Great. I look forward to hearing more about that in a little bit. But we would love to share some music with you first. It's been fantastic to put this debut episode together, and it's the first time for many of us who've basically admired one another from afar to work together. And we'd like to share Ich esse mit Freuden from Cantata 84 by Bach. What a joy to return to the music of Bach. I know that many of us turned to playing Bach when the pandemic hit, and certainly after our kind of initial grieving. I enjoyed working on that Bach sonata that we heard at the opening, which is originally for flute, of course, and the idea of taking Bach's music and playing it on other instruments is nothing new, of course. But actually, we are all engaged in that on some level, and that's a little bit of a running theme in this particular episode. I know that in the pandemic, you guys have been involved in all sorts of recording projects. You had a Marais CD come out in April, which is spectacular if people don't know about it. And in the meantime, you've been working on, embarking on a very ambitious project of recording virtual concerts this fall. And I know that you're planning a new CD recording of Bach transcriptions, which you alluded to. And I wondered if you could talk to us a bit more about that, Mélie.
Yeah, well, as I was saying, I played a Partita de Viola, which was the violin for women at the during a very brief century, maybe of use in France during the 18th century, basically. And this instrument is really interesting because being a different instrument but being aimed at imitating the violin means you can go and steal repertoire. It's exactly it's actually what it was intended for. So taking this further in a full project of transcription is really, really interesting. And Eric and I have been working together and listening to a lot of music and researching and trying a lot of music together and seeing what was getting us to the best results.
So, what is some of the repertoire that you are adapting to the Partition de Viol by Bach?
Well, I've been first looking into pieces that have had at least one version by Bach himself, or at least a movement exists in another form. That was my point of departure, and then I went slightly out of that box also, seeing how many examples there are actually of Bach reusing his own music for different instrumentation and instances. So we will have a very beautiful program with one of the Viola da Gamba Sonata, the D major, which I'm going to play today in this SalonEra, 2 movements on the bass viol, but on the par-dessus, it's really nice. I'm also picking a violin sonata in G major with beautiful Italianate ornamentation, all written by Bach, which is such a privilege to be able to play. I also went in the organ repertoire, and so we will do a trio sonata. And we've also created an interesting sonata of sacred works, so with the choral prelude and intertwining a slow movement from a trio sonata for organ. So it's going to be a varied experience, and people playing all sorts of instruments will recognize their repertoire being played differently. And as I know from experience of playing music and having just the joy to find it again in another form, I hope it's going to be just a pleasure. Yeah.
That sounds really fantastic and a really creative approach. It's not just being like, okay, let me steal this violin sonata, but creating something new informed by old practices. That's really what we are so interested and captivated by, and where we feel that there's additional room for creativity. So I'm very excited to hear about your progress on that project. Let's hear the D major gamba sonata as it comes down to us at the moment on the bass viol. Beautiful recording with you and Eric.
Thank you.
What a beautiful and incredibly rhetorical performance that was. I love Mélisande's playing. It's really fantastic. Sherry, I loved that you shared the fact that, this image of you as a 3-year-old running around listening to the Gloria from the B minor Mass. But I understand that the music of Bach played a really important role, and in fact, even the B minor Mass in particular, in your family before you were even a twinkle in your parents' eyes.
That's right, Deborah. As it turns out, so I was born and raised in India, and born in Mumbai, and grew up in a city called Pune nearby. But my parents, who are both from Mumbai, or Bombay is sort of, was called it when I was growing up there, my parents both sang in a choir. And as it turns out, the first piece that they sang together was the Bach B minor Mass. And this was at least 2 or 3 years before before they got married and before I was born.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a significant part, I think, of our family history, and only fitting, I guess, that this should be my first memory. And they both clearly loved the piece so much that it was played pretty often in our household, and I'm very grateful for that.
I know another couple that that met singing the Monteverdi Vespers, who've been together for
delightful.
well over 50 years, I think. Good friends of mine. And yeah, these love matches that come together around early music are something else. And I think really an indication, that Bach is this shared experience, whether you're in Mumbai or Regensburg or any number of places. And of course, you've sung Bach all over the world. Then absolutely fantastic. You mentioned that you are born and raised in India. And what was your musical education experience like there?
I was very fortunate again in that my parents both loved music and believed in music. And, India was a British colony until 1947. And so when my parents were growing up, there were a lot of British era sort of customs and cultural customs still prevalent in Indian society. And one of those is that, especially in my mother's family, my mother had 3 sisters. There were 4 girls in the family, and all of them learned to play the piano, or at least introduced to it in some form. And it turned out that my mother took to it more than the others. And so when I was growing up, both my parents were very keen that I should be immersed in music right away, and I started taking piano lessons quite early. And my mother passed away when I was quite young. I was 8 when she passed away, but my fondest memories with her are harmonizing music together. She knew that I had an ear for music. She knew that I loved it. She sang a lot. And so we would, she'd sing a melody and she'd say, well, you make up a harmony part now. You know how to do this. We've talked, you've heard me do it. And I have a really strong memory of us doing that together. And I think when I was in 2nd grade, she was an English teacher at my school, but she also directed the musical, which happened to be The Mikado, I think, that year. And I remember her sort of singing songs from that. So I have a lot of music memories from childhood. Some are bittersweet, but they're all important and formative. And I had a wonderful, wonderful piano teacher for much of my childhood in India who really shaped the direction I wanted to go. And I think I've known since I was very young that I wanted to be a musician, and nothing else quite gave me the same level of joy and satisfaction. I'm glad that I was given such a wonderful start to be able to go ahead and do all of that.
Well, we are so lucky to have you in our lives, and we're very lucky to have you share music with us this evening. And we've been admiring each other from afar for a long time, and so it was really fantastic to invite you to join us on this venture and to record these 2 arias with you. The first we heard already from Cantata 84. And I'd love to share in a moment the aria Sich, Üben im Lieben from BWV 202, which is a wedding cantata. And I wonder if you could just talk to us a little bit about the essence of this movement.
This is a true dance movement. It's the last big aria in the cantata. This is from a solo cantata. This is the last one, and it's about living together in unity and admiring the flora and the fauna and making all of that a part of your love and your celebration of marriage together. It's just such a wonderful piece. And I mentioned dance earlier. I mean, so much of Bach is rooted in dance forms, and I, for one, just can't help but sort of moving and swaying to things when I hear them. And this is one I think that is such a strong sense of rhythm. It's in triple meter. It's just, I think it's a lovely culmination of all the beautiful texts. The texts in this cantata range from being celebratory about nature to talking about very specific sort of characters in Greek mythology that are fostering love and peace and harmony, and Phoebus riding his chariot through the sky, and then to end with this beautiful celebration of love and flowers, I think is so delightful.
Yeah, and I think it has this beautiful kind of playful wave imagery in the text as well that you hear in all the running 16th notes, particularly in the oboe part. And, it dawned on me, since we've been talking about the Gloria of the B minor Mass, it's another kind of fabulous, buoyant, joyous, D major, triple meter movement. So let's listen to Sich, üben im Lieben from the wedding cantata by Bach. Hi, Shelby. It is so great to be working on SalonEra with you. You're an amazing associate producer, and you're, I don't want to say equally amazing, or more so amazing violinist. And you mentioned, as many of us do, come from playing modern instruments, have these formative experiences, on modern violin with the music of Bach. But how did you come to early music?
Well, I think, we all have our stories, and it's definitely a combination of factors. But, it's kind of a funny, random coincidence for me. I like Sherry mentioned, I'm also from a musical family, and one of my aunt is actually a historical keyboard player. So I've always, throughout my life, known that early music is a specialty, and it's great, and I've heard her play harpsichord lots, and I love it, but it was never, I just did my modern thing for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I was doing my master's degree and I needed a credit, which is like an embarrassing thing to admit, but Baroque violin fit in my schedule. So I signed up for the class, and I'm just so fortunate, looking back on how things turned out. I'm so fortunate for, that I was at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music, and I was just handed a violin. I had no idea. I didn't have any lessons on how to play it. Handed a violin, and then in walks Elizabeth Blumenstock teaching the class. So it was just this like amazing experience to be able to learn, about the, especially from Elizabeth, who was just so inspiring to me and so convincing with her playing, and so expressive, and I just really wanted to feel that way about music, and to also be able to learn about Baroque music while struggling with this instrument that, no shoulder rest, and it just kind of all, I was really taken by it. So I decided to pursue it, but it's like, I don't really consider it like a switch. I didn't like decide to change immediately. It was more like a mindset switch. Like, what is important to me about performing and playing violin, and what is it that I want to be doing with this instrument, and so it was really an organic kind of thing.
Well, I feel like you are really committed to unusual stuff and being able to explore that, with and through the equipment, which is what we talk about when we're talking about like Baroque violin versus modern violin. But I know that you love delving into interesting projects, so I'm wondering what is piquing your interest right now.
Well, I've had more time on my hands recently, like all of us. And you mentioned at the beginning of the episode that a lot of us have been playing Bach, and I also have been going back to those solo sonatas. You'll hear me play one in a little bit. But I've also just been exploring a ton of really underplayed solo repertoire for the violin. There is so much out there, and it's really fun. I also have some time to finish up a project that I've been working on for a number of years on Maddalena Lombardini-Sierman's Opus 5 violin duets. I did a recording project, and I finally had some time now to kind of go through those final stages.
Fantastic. Yeah. Those are violin duets by a late 18th century female composer? Is that?
Yes. So she is 1745 to 1818, and her story is just, she's like an incredible historical person, apart from her musicianship. She's just like she's a great story. I encourage everyone, if you haven't heard of her, go check her out. There have been some people recording her concertos, and she has some quartets, but these violin duets have actually never been recorded, and I love her music, and I think she's great. So that's been,
I think that's
good to have
fantastic. And I really hope that we'll hear more about that project and hear more of that music on a future SalonEra episode. In the meantime, you recorded for us the Borea with the double or double from the B minor Partita, and I wondered why you chose to include that on this debut episode, and what you'd like the audience to know or appreciate about it.
Well, yeah, I just love this Partita, so it wasn't a hard choice, but also the way that your idea to start this season with an All-Bach episode because of the versatility and we're hearing everyone's stories. Every musician and almost every music lover, whether they play an instrument or not, has some kind of connection to Bach because he's just that great. And I think this Partita is the only one of his 6 works for solo violin that have doubles at the after following each movement. And I thought, if we're showcasing the versatility and the kind of different lenses through which we can look at Bach's music, what better way to show, his own. He wrote the first movement and then he wrote another one based on the same harmonies, and it's just a unique. It's a freedom, to explore it in a different way.
I think that's great, and I think actually we've been when we were talking about earlier, and I know that it'll come up again. Bach's ornamentation is kind of unparalleled, and that's really one of the fun things when we get to play Bach's written out ornamentation in these doubles. Let's listen to your solo, Bach. Welcome back. That was such a beautiful performance, Shelby. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
We have one last collaboration to share tonight, which is the slow movement from the Bach double. And of course, when I think of the Bach double, I think of the oboe violin double, which is another sort of transcription, except of course it's sort of like a reverse engineering. What comes down to us, of course, is a concerto for two harpsichords, and it's relatively well accepted that the idea that the two harpsichord parts may have originally been for oboe and violin in the key of C minor. We've all been talking about these real formative experiences that we each have with music of Bach, and I have been playing the Bach double since I was 16 years old. I learned it on modern oboe. I remember entering my little youth orchestra concerto competition and along with my good friend and going to her house like every week for months, learning, having like this first experience with this piece that of course I've played now so many times professionally, and yet every partner that I get to play it with, it's always such a special experience, and it's so lovely to share this with you, Shelby. It's funny, of course, in a way to play such conversational music in a remote way. And so we did, in recording this, do a lot of back and forth, actually, to kind of simulate the rehearsal and speak each other's languages. But I think that the result is really beautiful. So I thank all of you for creating this. And let's listen to the Adagio from the Bach double, Concerto for oboe and violin. Thanks so much for tuning in to our premiere SalonEra episode. Still to come is a live Q&A with Shelby, Sherezade, Mélisande, Eric, and if you're watching tonight on Facebook or YouTube, be sure to like or subscribe to learn about upcoming episodes. It'll also make it easier to reach the Q&A, which goes live in a moment, so stay put. If you're watching via SalonEra.org, simply refresh your browser window at the end of this video and the live stream Q&A should appear. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, watch for a notification that the Late Elise account is going live. You can write questions for any or all of this episode's artists in the comments section below, and our artists will be answering your questions live in just a few minutes. But first, here's a few ways that you can support SalonEra. Thanks for watching SalonEra. We are thrilled to create this fresh and an entertaining experience for audiences at home, as well as provide an important creative outlet and paid opportunity for performing artists whose careers have been deeply impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. If you've already donated in support of this episode, thank you. If not, I hope you'll take a moment to do so. When you visit salonera.org/support, besides making a donation, you can also learn about subscribing to the series or even consider a special gift in support of one of our remote artists or an entire episode. In a few moments, all of our artists will be live in a Q&A session where we'd love to hear from you. If you're watching on our website, once this broadcast is over, just refresh your browser and your video window will update to the Q&A stream. But first, enjoy a preview of our next episode and consider supporting our artists and these broadcasts. Tune in on Monday, September 7 at 7:30 p.m. Eastern for our second episode, Classical Salon. We've got a fabulous slate of guest artists who will talk about their love for classical chamber music, introduce us to little-known composers like Ospelmeyer and Bruschetsky, and share music by Weber, Chevalier Saint-Georges, and more.